share these paintings with Knoxville and beyond over the next couple of months. This is just an informal talk that is already a normal crowd size for this. So we have a casual approach, but there'll be a time for questions at the end. So sometimes they go deep. So if you've got like a real zinger to throw out, there will be a time to do that.
Stump the artist.
Yeah, might not be possible.
I think it is.
But we'll see. I'm Brian Jebb. I'm the director of TriStar Arts, and yeah, I'm just really pleased to have you here. So without further ado, Jered Sprecher.
All right. Thank you, Brian. This is sort of wild because it's like the small, intimate crowd and somehow feels more daunting than like a large room. I want to thank Brian and Carrie for the invitation to show the work here, and also Wes, who's helped out with a lot of stuff along the way. And thank you all for coming here. I do have note cards. Don't worry, I will not be like reading them verbatim, but it's maybe to keep me on task. What is my time, Brian? So 45 minutes. Okay. And as I'm going, if there are questions, I'm happy to answer those or like entertain those along the way. So I will read a little bit off of this just to sort of set the stage a little bit. So there's lots of different ways I can think about sort of how I organize or think about my work, but one of them centers around wonder. And sort of maybe how I confront that or how other people confront that. But here's a little bit of, I guess, National Geographic information, okay? So at the equator, the Earth spins at 1,000 miles per hour, okay, all right? The Earth's elliptical trips around the sun is 67,000 miles per hour, okay? So start to imagine that. And then our solar system is whipping around the galaxy at 490,000 miles per hour. If that doesn't feel fast, if you look up into the night sky at the constellation Leo, we're moving in that direction at 872,405, give or take, miles per hour, towards something called the Great Attractor. I don't even know what the Great Attractor is, but we're moving quickly in that direction. As I think about those things, and I'm not thinking about them like at every moment of every day, but it's pretty daunting to think about that sort of like galactic speed. I think we also encounter like large, daunting things. Just thinking about something like, I looked up how much information is being generated, and just today 2.5 quintillion bytes of data were generated. I'm not sure how that breaks down, but compared to like, say, the history of the world until like maybe 2000, we probably like, that's what we're producing per day now. So there's a lot of information. So there's a bit of wonder and dauntingness and almost like not knowing, not understanding these like astronomical speeds and numbers. So I hope people had a chance to look around as you came in. But I want to first talk a little bit about this painting over here. It's a black and white striped painting. It's entitled Cicada. And it's the old one in the room. It's from 2018. And as you look around the room, you're going to see works that you're like, oh, that's an abstract, or that's more representational. And I don't think of myself with allegiance to one or the other, but my interest really is in painting, painting per se. And the images and objects that we make as people. But this particular painting, Cicada, a lot of the paintings start with an impulse. And around 2017, 2018, they are forecasting an epic crop of cicadas. And I remember being excited about that because I know some people are annoyed by cicadas during the summer, but I'm also sort of enthralled by this droning noise that is so loud and incessant that at sometimes you can also turn it out and not even hear the noise. And it's weird how somebody mentions, oh, the cicadas are loud, and all of a sudden you hear them again. And so I wanted to make a painting that had a sort of like quality to it. And so the incessant black and white stripes here became a little bit like a drone of the cicadas, or maybe like a Gregorian chant, or maybe a more recent album by the band Low or something like that. So there's a sort of like droning, sort of incessant quality to it. And if you sort of stand in front of it, it might even sort of pulsate a little bit. The painting's not moving, but that black and white repetition creates that sort of pulse. And so for me, oftentimes these sort of like elemental experiences are a sort of step into my sort of thinking and making in the studio. I don't necessarily know where I'm going, but I try to follow my nose with these sort of hunches about things. A more recent painting is Rivulets, which is a black and white one over here with a sort of blue-ish streak across the bottom. It looks like branches, a sort of a wild braid or tangle of thorns or branches in front of a brick wall. Behind the curtain, it's actually part of a wall from like Southland Liquor, which is just like a mile from here. At some point they had used like adhesive to put a sign on the wall, and then it was there, they ripped it off, but when they ripped it off, nobody bothered to chip off all the old adhesive. So it looked like this sort of Jackson Pollock painting on the side of Southland Liquors. But it also looked like this, in Jackson Pollock's paintings look like this too. It's this real bramble, tangled mess of branches. So I wanted to make a painting that had that sort of quality to it and had this sort of connected quality to it. So the title for the show is Under the Branches, and I just was thinking about these different sort of connectors, even if they're sort of tangential from one work to the other. Okay. So that's how that painting came about, and oftentimes the paintings, as you look around the room, there is a relationship between, I talked about the sort of like droning, whether it's like an electric guitar or like somehow a digital amplified sound, or something like a cicada. So there's things in the sort of electronic sort of digital realm, but there's also things in the sort of, as we think about it as a sort of unadulterated or natural world. Those are different categories that we've created. So I'm going to just continue to walk a little bit around the room and give a little bit more, I guess, context, a little bit behind the scenes for the paintings. So this painting over here by Wesley is entitled Hours. And it's a good example of one of the paintings in here that dips into genre painting a bit. And so it's like a still life. There's some paintings in here that feel more like landscape. And when I was in college as a young art student, maybe my sophomore year, my mom was like, Jared, can you paint a painting of a flower for our dining room? I said, Mom, I can't do that. I'm a serious artist. You have to be careful what you say. But no, I should always listen to your mom, I guess. So I relented or gave in, and later that year I made a painting of a flower for my mom. Still hangs by the dining room table. And I didn't think about that for a long time, maybe like 10 years past that. And I started collecting these different images of flowers. And I was like, well, I thought of myself as an abstract painter at that point. And I was like, well, maybe I should just sort of begin to like paint some of these to see what it means that I keep collecting them. So this painting started by referring to like a 1960s like Better Homes and Gardens flower arranging book. And it was like the color was faded and it was off, and it maybe even looked dated itself. And I was like, oh, I'd never want a flower arrangement like that in my house. But the image actually just kept haunting me because of the sort of the black or darker background in it. In the original photograph, it felt like a Dutch still life painting and had this sort of quality to it. So a lot of still life paintings we think of as like, oh, it's a beautiful thing, but also there's a long history of its sort of life and death associated with that. You know, so if in a Dutch painting, if you see like a wilted flower or a fly that's landing on it, it's like a slight nod to the passage of time and that things will sort of pass away. And so as I was working on this painting, translating this image that I'd found in this old flower arranging book, I wanted it to have a sort of quality, maybe a little bit like Marty McFly in Back to the Future. If you remember, he's like messed with, I guess, the space-time continuum or disrupted the future. And as he's back in time, he starts to fade away. So I wanted to make this painting that had this sort of floral motif, like a still life or a vanitas, or even a memento mori. But it was also sort of fading in and out, and basically a painting in progress. And so maybe being stripped away or being added to in the process. So I wanted it to really be an image in flux. So that's ours, and some paintings happen fairly quickly, like this painting here, Rivulets. I was enthralled with the weird adhesive on the brick wall for a number of years, but making the painting happened over maybe the course of like 2 to 3 weeks. Ours started as another painting and sat in my studio for a good 4 or 5 years, and really like was stuck and not moving anywhere. And so it can really vary in here, the sort of timeline for the creation of the paintings. I'm going to talk about a group of paintings as well. So I think of them as like the grayscale flowers. So there's sky above, earth below, and there is of water and stone, and then there's synapse over here, and then on this back wall over here by Rubens is stone. And, oh yeah.
We actually have some handouts that
Oh,
we
yeah.
start passing around from the back.
Okay.
To show the works.
Okay.
Clockwise starting.
Okay, that's perfect. So, around 2021, maybe even starting in 2022, I was still leafing through this book of flowers and gardens that was published in the 60s. And it had a lot of what we would now consider pretty low resolution images of roses and different garden varieties. And that grainy black and white quality, I just wanted to sort of understand those flowers through the process of painting them. But I had this sort of urge that I wanted them to be a little bit like a carved stone flower that you'd find on a gravestone, or have a little bit of a sort of embedded quality like a gray tin type photograph, something that has a sort of off color and sort of shimmer to it. So I started basically painting on them but not wanting them to be like a slick painted surface, but wanting them to feel really sort of touched and handled. So there'd be a process of painting, maybe like disrupting that painting by putting a grid on top of it. The one in back, stone, if you get close to it, it has all these thin little white marks on it, which were made by me using tape that had paint on it and just dropping it on the surface of the canvas. And then after there was a large wad of tape on there, sort of like the off-cast from another painting, I pressed it all into it and created this sort of little traces. It's almost like broken glass or lines that are across the surface of it. So each one of these paintings, I wanted them to have a real quality of being sort of held, felt, that they're almost like a palimpsest, that it's like there's multiple stages of sort of writing and inscribing that's on each one of them. The painting right behind me here is Braid, and for me, and you'll see there's like a sort of weaving structure there, and you can see a sort of light outline of a sort of irregular grid, which is like a weaving structure. And then that one in the back, the sky above, earth below, also has that. And I would say probably since around 2018, I've been using an irregular grid. I've made paper weavings based off of it. I first sort of pulled it from overshot weaving patterns, which is approach to weaving that you would see here in Appalachia. But I thought of it as having ties to early computing. Basically, early computing machines used weaving technology to do their work in terms of the mechanisms. But even as you think about it today, well, these paintings are on canvas or linen, which is woven. But I also like the sort of metaphorical possibilities of it. In a woven fabric, it stores information, but it also can hold things in tension. And the sort of push and pull on it, it sort of gains strength by that, even though things are held in tension. And so for me, I feel like a lot of these images should be sort of held in tension. And so Braid in particular, it has a bit of the tangle of sort of twigs or branches like that are in rivulets. It's like a small section of it. You can sort of see it in the background. But then it has this overshot weaving pattern that's overlaid over the top of it. And I went back and sort of painted in little sections as it developed. I pulled this word braid from a book. It's sort of interviews and thoughts by the poet Stanley Kunitz. It's called The Wild Braid. It's a delightful little book just talking about his thoughts on gardening over the course of his life, the garden that he maintained in Provincetown. So I've had a number of paintings over the years that use this sort of woven pattern that also bear, in part, like the name Wild Braid or Braid as a reference to that. It is a lovely book, and it makes a very nice gift. So encourage you to take that. It's like a real nice contemplation of art and life together. What I'd maybe sort of like to sort of pull things around to is this painting right here, right between me and the door, I guess. And it's called The Other Side of Silence. And it's one of those paintings that occurred over a long period of time. And so the surface that it's on probably hung around my studio for a good 6 years or so. And then in spring 2023, I guess declared it complete for the moment. For me, it's sort of, a lot of these are like zooming in closely to the flowers, and it creates a space sort of like this, you know, like sitting across the table from someone in terms of the flowers and those images. This one, I feel like it opens up and has maybe multiple horizons and feels a bit like a landscape. And so maybe it's like a really sort of abstract or almost sort of visionary interpretation of a Turner painting or an Albert Bierstadt painting, where there's this sort of luminosity and sort of opening out towards these multiple horizons. And it started, as you can probably imagine, with some pretty wide, sort of aggressive sort of swipes of color across the surface. And the sort of finishing of it was sort of thinking about where these multiple horizons might be, and going back and sort of, with a smaller brush and a much more like restrained, quiet approach, sort of thinking of laying in the colors of the sky, and sort of touching the sky in that sense, maybe even caressing it a little bit. So it has these different sort of haptic senses to it, whether it's a sort of quick sort of passage or a sort of slowing down and sort of tracing things in it as well. So that's a sort of tour of the exhibition there, and I hope I didn't over-explain anything. But I am happy to answer any questions or circle around to anything else that people are interested in. So, yeah, Christopher.
So with this painting, is this, you said you passed it for years.
Yeah.
Did you like photograph it or just through your mind?
Yeah. If you talk to Christine, my wife, she will make fun of me because about every time that I would, I'm not going to Southland Liquor all the time, but go there on occasion to buy a bottle of wine or something like that. And whenever I go there, I would always have to snap a photo of it in different light. So you can go visit Southland Liquor. You can look for the segment on the wall. But yeah, I've been going back there and photographing it. It is really nondescript, and you'd be like, that is really bad, like painting practice. Whoever painted it should have scraped it off. But for me, it's this like sort of wonderful drawing that's on the side there. And I like how it's evocative of that tangled sort of mess of branches.
Did you ever reference any other photos of when you were painting, or did you just kind of go from that experience of taking those photos?
Yeah, I was definitely referencing the photos as I was working on it. So there's like projecting, quickly sort of tracing and wiping away things. And so there's sort of multiple sort of times going back to the image. Like this is very like overly like worked for myself, but I painted like everywhere you see that dark black, I painted blue first, and then I painted 2 layers of black on it, which was totally unnecessary. But it's like I kept wanting to make that black deeper and even more graphic. So. Yeah.
When you said you painted it black, you meant just the black lines, or you painted the whole thing black?
Just the black lines, but I put this big wash of gray over it and sort of wiped away all the areas where it's white or that really light gray.
Yeah. And then the next question is, do you paint the bricks first?
No, they were the end actually was sort of going. Yeah.
Is that because that made it a lot harder to do it that way?
No, it was like the way to finish it. So yeah. Yeah, Kelsey.
The first time I saw your paintings in person was when I was tasked with installing one of them at the museum.
Oh yeah.
And it's A Plane as a Pocket.
Yes.
I know it's a much longer title, but I've never remembered
Yeah,
the
yeah.
title. And I was thinking about you talking about holding the paintings or feeling like wanting to hold them in your hand. And that one's quite large.
Yeah.
Over 20 feet, I think.
Yeah.
But I remember picking one of the panels off the wall and like holding it probably this close to my face.
Yeah.
Which is the beautiful privilege of my job. But having such a different experience looking that close at it. And I think your paintings demand a lot of really close looking. And my question is, what do you
No, it's a really good question. I'll maybe answer a little bit different question. I think a lot of some of the more recent paintings, in particular some of the paintings that were hanging at the KMA and that were suspended, and there's been other paintings like this that people will look at them and see them online and they don't think that they're paintings, but they feel like a digital image, whether it's like an AI thing or like something that's sort of broken down, or like a low-res digital image. And I'm constantly thinking about those things, but it's a weird thing that it's like it imitates it and then it sort of becomes it, and it's hard for people to sort of decipher those two things when it goes back into that machine.
Yeah, I think that was the experience I had holding it.
Yeah, so much of things are designed to like be in the smartphone, in that bit of science fiction. And so yeah, it's a weird thing where like the body goes away. So maybe that comes around. Like for me, the body, the physical presence of a painting is really important. And yeah, you can only get that in their presence. You can sort of hint at it if you document things really well, or like photograph them slightly from the side. But you can lose a lot in between there. Yeah.
Does that make you sad, that loss of like surface in the digital image, or do you feel okay with it?
Maybe, yeah, there's some sadness, I think, to that, but it's sort of like I'm at peace with it, or maybe I just keep fighting with it. Yeah.
Jered, we met a lot of years ago.
Yeah.
About when you started at UT, I think. And I remember right after that you had a painting hung in the Knoxville Museum, the larger painting.
Yeah.
And I can't remember all of it exactly, but it was very different from these.
Yeah.
And I'm curious about how you would say your work has progressed or transformed, or whatever you consider has happened.
Yeah.
And how you've changed over that length of time.
Yeah, so that's the painting that Kelsey mentioned, and it was finished in 2014, and if I can get the full title, it's my longest title to date. A plane is a pocket in the corners of the mind. And for me, that was a reference to the small, gorgeous nothings, like Emily Dickinson's little scraps that she would compose poems on. She called those her gorgeous nothings. How has it changed? I think that painting was really meant to have a lot of, let's say, sort of overawe the viewer just in sort of like encountering this large, colorful thing. And there's an image of a flower, and there's an image of a sort of family of birds that are sort of submerged in the abstraction of that painting. And I think more recently, I've let that imagery that often was pushed back in the paintings come forward. And so a lot of the flowers, sometimes there's been birds, some of those things, they have a chance more to emerge. They may get submerged again, but they come out. What has changed for me? Oh, I feel. I hope this is true. I hope this is right. I don't want to feel too apologetic for the paintings. Like if I have an impulse to sort of make a certain type of image, I think I've learned to maybe go ahead and embrace that. Because there's still part of my head that where, like, when my mom asked me to paint a flower, I was like, no, I can't do that. I'm a serious artist. Or maybe the other answer is like, oh, people just think of those as beautiful decorative things. And so for me, they're more than that. But sometimes we can tell ourselves, oh, I'm not going to deal with that subject matter or that image because I think it's cliche or because people discount it. So yeah, I'm trying to own it more, to run towards those things. Yeah, Adriana.
I was wondering if there's any, how do you decide what specific, I guess botanical imagery or specific plants that you decide to portray? Because I know you said you collect like certain images.
Yeah, yeah. Part of it is that sort of initial sort of aesthetic reaction to it, like what is its color, its shape, how does it catch the light? But then there's often time thinking about like, well, before the Renaissance or in the Renaissance or Victorian era, like what sort of symbolism did some of these things have? And sort of trying to pick that up. I'm sort of curious, like, because flowers, you know, you start looking up the symbolism or meaning of flowers, and like they mean everything because they're like tied to lots of things. And so it's like they're amazing, beautiful containers that are like we're trying to make them hold all of this, and it you know, we can project onto them, but it's also sort of hard for them to hold all that. But like a concrete example for me is, and I'm sorry you can't see it from here, it's a painting called Synapse. And the image, I took it while I was visiting my parents in Kansas City. And there's just like a field, like a block away from them. And it was prime thistle time. So there's big thistles there. And I had been wanting to make a painting based off of thistle. Like symbolically, thistles are about mourning and about dealing with heavy things and that. And so it was important for me to like, coming out of 2020, 2021. I needed to make a thistle painting. I think there'll be some more thistle paintings, but they're like wonderful alien-looking plants. But yeah, that was the sort of thing that drew me to that. Yeah.
When you're looking at like some of the history of some of these flowers and what they were
Yeah.
in art and whatnot, do you ever like encounter a moment where you're like, thistles, they don't really feel like mourning to me.
Yeah.
Like, is that ever a thing that you engage with?
Yeah, yeah. And
Not that thistles don't.
no,
But
yeah.
like, is that an anemone?
Yeah.
Whatever it represents normally.
Yeah, and sometimes just through like the process of painting them and me sort of wrestling with the image, it sort of derails that or sort of changes that. And it's also just like important just for me to remind myself, it's like there's the creative reasons why I'm like, oh, I want to use that, and this is some of the interesting story, history, baggage that could come with that image. But as each person walks into here, they're going to have different experiences. Be like, oh, well, my grandmother always grew peonies, and so like a painting's going to hit very like differently. Or if I think of poppies, I think of this, and so you can go from like heroin trade to like your grandmother's garden. Different types of poppies, but poppies just the same. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you.
Yeah.
You kind of opened up with space.
Yeah.
And then you talked about Jackson Pollock, and you talked, under the branches, there's all these references to like fractals, sort of.
Oh yeah.
I'm wondering if that is something that you've connected with synapses even.
Yeah.
Fractal.
Oh yeah.
Is that something that you've ever explored, or is that just something that I'm picking up with my own
No.
subconscious?
It was not like at the forefront of my mind today, but going back even to those overshot weaving patterns, they're not exactly fractals, but there is a sort of smaller part, or larger part to them, like you have in fractals. That sort of repeating thing that can fold in on itself. And so, yeah, that sort of organization and surprising complexity to things, I think, is something that I constantly going back to. You even find it in flowers and things like that. Yeah.
What's next?
What's next?
What's coming up in your studio and exhibitions and views and anything you want to share?
What's next? Let's see. Brian and I are going to have a show in Memphis, and that's part of an ongoing collaboration that we've done, where we've done a show at Covenant College down on Lookout Mountain, at the Suburban up in Milwaukee, and this is going to be at Christian Brothers in Memphis. And that's a chance for us to both sort of play with our works and sort of see how they talk to each other in the space. For me, that's fun to like work with the gravity, the literal gravity of Brian's work, and then also juxtapose whether it's paintings or these like really small incidental drawings that I make. They're akin to the gorgeous nothings of Emily Dickinson. They have a sort of like small paper quality to them. And then after that, I'm like rebooting the studio right now. And so I let myself have a little bit of downtime. I curated a show for a space in Nashville. And so I'm anxious to get back into the studio and see what the next body of work looks like.
What happens to these books? Have you all marketed and sold, or do you? These are all Michael Addict. You have all of these upstairs someplace?
So Rubens really wants that one. So, yeah, I mean, if they're sold, that's great. Otherwise, they become they go into storage space. Yeah. So I'm happy when they get a chance to come out and people get to see them and take them in. But there'll be times where they're in storage. So I'm happy when they get out and about, whether they're in a museum or a gallery or anything like that. This is a real treat because I did the 2017 show at the KMA, and then John Powers included 2 paintings in a show at the Emporium earlier this year. But it's not like I have work up in Knoxville all the time. So it's nice to be able to sort of show some of the new stuff that I've made, just to have the home team see them. So.
And with the info sheet, that's what's on the desk. We don't ever list prices are available on request. We receive recognition and we redirect people to the artists. So if you're interested in acquiring something, so first-hand conversation with the artist is the way.
All right, thank you all.